All right, it is Thursday, March 5th, and we've got another edition of the Tip-Off Show powered by Wager Talk TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Smith. Don't forget, follow me on Twitter at Jared Lee Smith. And, of course, I've got my guys flanked around me. We're going to talk some college hoops. Ralph Michaels at Twitter at Cal Sports LV. And, of course, Drew Martin on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. Guys, what's going on? Ralph, I'll start with you. How was your night, bud?
It was all right. It started off slow, one couple late games, and I didn't get time to do the sheet today. I was working on some conference tournament stuff, but let me just run down the biggest upsets so our guys know those before we go to Drew. Texas A&M beats Auburn. I'm sure Drew's going to talk about that with his Auburn cap on a little bit. Northridge beat Riverside. They were an 11-point dog. Wyoming knocks off Colorado State as a 10.5-point dog. I tweeted out a system we'll talk about little in the show, Jared, that I saw you commented on. Fordham, a team we talked about perhaps with pace, but they knock off George Washington as a 7.point dog. And again, another game we're going to talk about in the Mountain West. Air Force knocks off Fresno as a 5.5-point dog. So in the Mountain West last night, two upsets already day one with Wyoming and Air Force. Clearly the two worst teams in the conference pulling the outright upsets.
Yeah, interesting stuff in the Mountain West Conference. We'll dive a lot into that tournament as it really heats up today with some of the big boys going. Drew, you got the Auburn cap on. I wouldn't say it was a crucial game for the Tigers last night, but you never want to lose on your home floor, especially as a big favorite as they were, as Texas A&M gets the win there.
Yeah, very surprising. I mean, Auburn has kind of been a great case study in home road splits, and they haven't lost many games in Auburn Arena in what, 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah.
So that was very surprising to me. And Ralph talked about it with Air Force, a team that hasn't been very good at all in Mountain West play, out of Mountain West play, just talent-wise really down. They pull the outright upset. Now, heck, Ralph and I get to go see him live in person today. So we'll see how the Falcons do today, man.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous of that. Before we get into some of the other interesting games, interesting nuggets from last night, don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Wager Talk TV. And, of course, visit our homepage, wagertalk.com, at sportsmemo.com. We do have a coupon for you right now, JS39. That coupon gives you 3 days all access to any of the handicappers on our site. And, of course, they've got some great picks and trends and angles and all that good stuff. It's about $49 to $70 off the regular price there. So JS39 gets you 3 days all access to anywhere handicap on our site. So be sure to go to wagertalk.com and sportsmemo.com to take advantage of that full benefit. So some of the other games that interested me last night, Ralph, I'll start with you. I think the Big East is really starting to come into focus. Creighton took care of business against Georgetown last night. That wasn't much of a surprise. Maybe Villanova upending Seton Hall on senior night. Maybe that was a little bit of a surprise. Does that change your handicap of this Big East Conference at all as we get to the Garden next week?
No, we talked about it on this show. We talked about Villanova beating a great free throw shooting team. That isn't even really what got them there. They were only 10 of 18. But what they do is they're one of those teams that I mentioned yesterday shoot better on the road than at home. Well, what did they do? From 2 points, they were 15 of 22, 68%. From 3-point, you were 13 of 32, 41%. You go and shoot those type of numbers on the road, you're going to win a lot of games. So, we saw Villanova basically play. They had 5 guys play 35 minutes or more. So that shows how much they wanted that game. Seton Hall had 7 guys play 22 minutes or more. So Villanova basically played their starters. Seton Hall went 7 deep.
Yeah, that was an impressive win for Villanova on the road. We talked a little bit about that Providence game yesterday against Xavier. We talked about the total being steamed up there before the game. It was the first game on the board, no surprise. And actually the total hit relatively easily, 80 to 74. The Friars got the win. Providence, I think, is a tournament team now as they continue to win down the stretch. Drew, this Virginia team, man, 46-44. They beat Miami on the road last night. When I looked at the box score last night, I was like, is this a halftime score? They scored 43 points combined in the second half. Virginia just keeps grinding out wins. Do you think that they're, in any chance that they make another run at this? Based on what we've seen from them over the last couple of weeks, they've been playing really well.
I mean, I think that they're really good and, make a run. Sure, Jared. I think that they can. I mean, they're well coached, obviously great defense again. Now they do have the top line talent down from last year. So kind of the ability to kind of get them out of trouble when they're down, is going to be a little bit tougher this year, but sure. I mean, Sweet 16, possible outside shot, Elite Eight, something like that. But when you get into big boys game after game, I think they're going to be up against it. Plus the fact, this year, if they're making a double dribble, likely gets called as I wear my Auburn hat.
Yeah, I was actually watching the highlights of that game. Yeah, a little. He's still a little hurt. Cost the Tigers a shot to win the national title. That would have been an interesting matchup, considering Auburn's offense and Texas Tech's defense certainly were the staples of those teams last year. It would have been an interesting clash of styles to see those two teams match up. But that's not the world we live in. The other one that really interested me last night, LSU. The SEC is a fascinating handicap. Drew, I just feel like some of these teams and LSU is really the one I'm thinking of because of what happened to Arkansas or what happened with Arkansas last night in Fayetteville. I just feel like defense is just not something that these teams prioritize very much, with the exception of maybe Kentucky. And I think it's going to be the downfall of the SEC once we get to the tournament. I'm going to be fading a lot of these SEC teams in the tournament, especially LSU.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC is a fascinating case study and handicapping case study going into March Madness. Is this I'm with you. I think defense is definitely down in the SEC. However, the argument, is it just the offenses in the SEC are that good?
Sure.
So when they get into out-of-conference play, is it actually going to kind of, revert back to the norm, so to speak? We'll see what happens. I mean, just last night on Sports Grid, the late night show, we were talking, 6-7 Pac-12 teams getting in. If the SEC's kind of matched up against the Pac-12, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm a little bit of a homer here. I'm going to be kind of looking to kind of be putting money on the SEC teams, I think, Jared. So I don't know if it's really that down or if it's just kind of like offense in the SEC's that good. I happen to think the talent's actually still there with the SEC. So I don't know. We'll see.
Drew, I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How you guys are talking about how many SEC teams did you guys talk about being in?
Yeah, I know.
4 or 5?
Florida, I would say.
Kentucky, Florida, LSU, and Auburn are in.
Yeah, those are the 5.
Mississippi State probably, and then you have South Carolina, and Tennessee would probably have to win 3 games in the title. But, Jared, you talked about the SEC. You could just look at KenPom ratings. The top team in the SEC is number 45 in defense.
Wow.
That is just absolutely absurd. And that's South Carolina, followed by Kentucky at 49. So to have your top team number 45 in defensive efficiency goes exactly to what you said.
And Ralph, is there any stats out there? Because, some of these teams are really high efficiency rating on offense. Is there any stats out there that you know of to kind of take, and I'm talking about SEC teams, take the conference play out of that number and just look at these SEC teams out of conference defensive ratings?
Yeah, there's a site. It's Bart Torvik where you can actually put in conference and non-conference. Let's see if I can. I don't think you can eliminate. You can do conference only, but I can't eliminate non-conference. So
I haven't found
guess
that
the
either.
answer is, but really, KenPom does. When you're talking efficiency, KenPom's numbers and Torvik's numbers take into what the offense did, and the efficiency numbers are based on what they would do against a normal foe. So I think that, they are worked into the system, but I understand what you're saying is that you're saying they may be so elite that they're skewed because of the system.
Yeah, I'm going to be fascinated to see. I think the SEC and the Pac-12 are the 2 conferences to me that I know the least about in terms of how their games this year translate to what we're going to see in the tournament. I feel very confident about my handicaps on the Big East and the Big Ten and the ACC in terms of where these teams are and how their game translates. I think because the SEC and the Pac-12, I haven't just watched it enough. You guys out west might watch those teams a little bit more than I do here in the East Coast. But the SEC to me, I just don't see, and even Kentucky, and a lot of people are high on Kentucky right now, and rightfully so. They put together a nice season. But you mentioned it, Ralph. When I look at teams to handicap in March, the first thing I look at is their adjusted defense. And if they're outside of the top 50, I'll do a case study on this for tomorrow. I'd be willing to bet that there hasn't been a team that's won a national title outside of the top 50 in the last 2 decades of adjusted defense.
I did an article like that last year, and I think everything holds form except the 2 UConn wins.
Okay. And those were unique years, especially because of Kemba Walker.
Yeah.
And I guess one guy can really wreck the tournament like that.
Like I said, I did do that last year, and there's a lot of things that hold true to form, with the exception of, the number of wins, the number of conference wins, the Ken Palm efficiency ratings, again, with the exception of the Huskies.
I remember last year, I did do some research on this, and Virginia was second in offense and 5th in defense. And I think that's kind of the recipe that you need. I think you need to be balanced. And I think teams, and Auburn, I believe, was a top 5 offense, and I believe they were 36th in defense.
Yeah, they're still good.
And I think, they were still in the top 40, Drew. That's my point. This Kentucky team that everyone's touting as a team that can go to the Final Four, they're 49th in adjusted defense. So they're even further back from Auburn's defense. And Auburn's defense was, just good enough to get them into the Final Four. Their offense got really hot, and they were a top 5 offense. Kentucky's offense is only 33rd, so their offense isn't even humming at the rate that Auburn's was last year. So that's why I'm a little hesitant. And if you look at LSU, it's top 5 offense, 192nd ranked defense.
All right,
so
quiz, guys.
Here we go.
I'm looking at the Ken Palm ratings. I want you guys, just off the top of your head, name me any team that comes off your top of your head that is top 20 offense and defense right now.
I would say the 2 Big Ten teams that I know for a fact are Michigan State and Ohio State. Duke also is in that mix, and I want to say San Diego State as well. But they might be just outside of it now.
It's going to be Baylor, Ohio State,
and Kansas,
Michigan State, Duke, San Diego State, and Kansas. Those are your teams' top 20 offense and defensive efficiency.
I'd be willing to bet right now, Drew, that one of those teams will cut down the nets. That's my bet right now. Yeah, that's my bet right now.
I'm with you. No argument here, man.
Yeah, one of those,
especially if they can knock down their free throws.
Exactly, and I think that's where Baylor struggled a little bit this year. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think one of those Big 12 teams, I think Baylor has struggled with free throws. The Big Ten teams are pretty solid across the board. I'm telling you, I'm on Michigan State hard. I've been pounding Michigan State futures for the last couple of weeks. That's my team right now. If it's not Kansas, I think it's Michigan State to cut down the nets. I think where's the Final Four? Atlanta this year? Atlanta,
yes,
I think.
Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta. I'll have to do a case study on how Michigan State's done in Atlanta in the past. I want to say I know Atlanta's hosted a bunch of Final Fours in the past.
All right, let's move. Different venue. It used to be at the Georgia Dome. Now it's going to be at Mercedes.
Yes, that's actually a very good point. And I think this will definitely be the first Final Four at Mercedes, since it's a very new stadium.
Fairly certain, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Interesting market movers today. We talked a little bit. You guys are going to be in the house for this UNLV game, so I guess we'll get to this one first. This is my contrarian dog of the day. I love this pick. I'm going to fade UNLV in this spot. I don't have a lot of stats to back it up. It's really just the numbers going against UNLV in this spot. So it opened at 3. And the line's down to 1, even though we've got 70% of the action on the Rebels here. So a ton of reverse line movement favoring Boise State. I know they just played each other a week ago, and UNLV won by 10. So, the numbers don't back me up here, Ralph, but I feel like Boise State, the line movement really points to the Broncos playing well today.
I think a lot of times now, granted, the sharp market's here in Vegas and this game's in Vegas, but I know, following the lines and watching a lot of tournaments, people tend to not give the home court edge when you're in the tournament like it should be. And people think, oh, this is the Mountain West tournament. This is a neutral game. Well, it's not a neutral game. It's on UNLV's home court. They're, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't UNLV listed as the top team? No, they are listed as the bottom team. Okay. Sometimes you have the situation, UNLV is the higher seed, so they're the lower seed. When we get to the next game, and if UNLV wins, they're going to actually be the top team, and that's where sometimes you could find an advantage with the line, because people perceive the top team as being the road when actually they're at home, and the top and bottoms go by the seedings.
Interesting. I mean, I again, personnel-wise, I haven't capped UNLV a ton this year. Drew, I know you've watched them a little bit more. Is there anything in this game that you would think that they can't do what they did last week, which is beat Boise State by double digits?
I mean, To answer your question here, Jared, UNLV is hot, man. They've won 5 straight, won and covered. They're knocking down their shots. I took it on the chin betting against them against Colorado State, and they just didn't miss, and it has not stopped. So them being at home, hosting Boise State, hosting in their home arena here. I'm not looking to step in front of this UNLV train. There's even whispers of UNLV making a run here and winning this tournament and getting into March Madness. Now, that might be a little bit of home cooking here in Las Vegas, but it is a little bit of word on the street. And I'm just not of the profile, Jared, of stepping in front of college basketball teams that are just knocking down their shots at an unbelievable rate. It's really tough to take their full, their season-long stats here and kind of handicap them that way, just because they are playing their best basketball here at the end of the season.
Hey, Jared, one note on UNLV. It's addition by subtraction. Donnie Tillman was one of their most important players up until February, and he got hurt and was out for the year. That forced UNLV to go small ball. Tillman's 6'7" or 6'8". He's one of their inside offensive presences. When he got hurt against Nevada, they ended up losing that game in overtime on February 2nd. They had to change the lineup. They decided that they didn't have the personnel to have any centers or big forwards in there. And what did they do? Since that time, they won those 5 games in a row, including going to New Mexico and winning, and going to San Diego State and knocking off the Aztecs.
One of the biggest wins in the country.
Yeah, that was a big win, and we're going to see San Diego State a little bit later today too, and that'll be one of the top matchups that we certainly talk about in a little bit. Wichita State and Memphis. This is a weird total here. Open at 134, up to 137.5. 55% of the action is on the under. I've watched Memphis a lot this year. Memphis can move the ball around. And I've been impressed with this Memphis team. They run at one of the fastest tempos in the entire college basketball landscape. I haven't watched Wichita State a ton this season, but Ralph, if one team is setting tempo like this, and Wichita State has an average tempo, they've got a really good defense, according to KenPom. But we've seen a massive move here in this total towards the over. Any interest in handicapping this Wichita State Memphis total with the Tigers really setting the tempo? You would imagine that's the tempo that's going to be played in this game, considering most of the money, most of the action here is on the over.
I respectfully disagree, and I already bet the under.
Okay.
I got to the window with it. You look at Wichita State, they're an entirely different team on the road. They're much slower tempo. They're in the 250s as far as tempo goes away from home. Okay. I think they're only 2-7 against over-under their last 9 road games. When you look at Memphis, who they played, when they're a favorite, they press the pace. When they have a total in the 130s and they're playing a slower pace team, I think they're 3-7 over under their 10 games. So I think there's some value because of the matchup, because of the way Wichita State plays their style. And again, you look at Memphis, they're a team that can play very fast. Their tempo numbers say they play fast, but looking at the matchup against good defensive teams with slower tempos, Memphis seems to morph into a slower team when they're facing them, at least in my opinion.
And Jared, you know what Ralph is saying right there, trends and angles are great and you should use them as much as possible. But in my opinion, that matchup handicapping, meaning like how the pace is actually dictated to you and how teams can do that. So versus a certain profile, they'll slow it down, versus another profile, they'll speed it up. In my opinion, that's the best way to win in college basketball totals, because that's not always reflected in the line.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're seeing with a lot of these tournament games, or that we will be seeing with a lot of these tournament games, is how teams will change their tempo based on situations.
Yes,
and so exactly. And so teams that like a Memphis, and maybe Memphis is a bad example because they're maybe just very one-dimensional with their tempo, but teams that are very well coached, like Greg Marshall, who's a great coach, who has the ability to throttle up and throttle down as the situation calls for it. So keep it. That is a great point, and that is definitely something to keep an eye on as we get to these tournament games. Speaking of TNA, Ralph, what do you got for us today, brother? Big Thursday here on the card.
Well, do you want to talk about the Mountain West things, or are we going to do that in the next segment? Should I bring that up now?
We can, bring it up now. Yeah, go ahead, because I think I think I got a couple Big Ten games on the on the big matchups tonight, and then we can definitely touch on San Diego State.
Yeah, and Ralph, I need some.
Let me mention some team angles first.
Okay.
Before we talk about the system that I tweeted out that you commented on.
Yeah.
Bucknell, a team a lot of people don't pay attention to, but they're 2-16 over under their last 18 games. Idaho State, red hot. 12-1-1 over under their last 14 games. Washington, again, the Huskies had an injury. They had a transfer point guard who didn't make grades come the middle of December. Washington now 1-11 ATS their last 12 road games.
Wow.
You have Winthrop, who has lost 8 straight against the spread. And Houston, a team that has a game against UConn that I think is going to be a low-scoring game. Houston 2-12 over under their last 14 games. So those are some team angles. For those that follow me on Twitter at CalSportsLV, I tweeted out a conference tournament system. And for the newbies watching, an angle is team-specific. It means Idaho State is 12-1-1 over under. When we talk about a system, it means any team that these situations happen to. So a system to me is much stronger because you have all types of teams. And what I tweeted out this morning is, number one, you want a system to have a fair amount of plays so you got a good sample size. Number two, you want a system to go back enough years that you know the influxes of seasons doesn't change it. Well, this one goes back to 2010. In the conference tournament, when a team pulls the upset as a dog of 5.5 or more, and they have no rest against a rested opponent. I mean, this is one that makes complete sense. You have a lower seed who had to play the first night of the tournament. They pulled the upset as a dog of 5.5 or more, and now you're playing a rested team who is a higher seed who might have looked past you, but now that you pulled the upset the night before, they are focused. Those teams, it would be Fade Wyoming tonight and Fade Air Force, have gone 3-40 straight up, 10-32-1, 24% against the spread. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of times I tweet out, is this myth or urban legend? This is one of these that make complete sense. It's boom. A team played the night before. You're playing a higher seed rested. You're off a big upset as a dog. Can you keep that momentum for back-to-back games? Well, I'll tell you what, 76% of the time in the last decade, you haven't been able to do that. So that system tonight says to fade Air Force and to fade Wyoming.
Yeah, and Air Force has got probably the toughest matchup of the day. I think that was the biggest spread that I saw on the board today. 17. Actually, no, Liberty is laying 17 to Stetson also tonight in the, I think that's the Ace Sun. Liberty's a legit team as well, but Liberty's also that line's come off of 17 back to 15.5, back to 16. So just like we saw the other night, Liberty, I think it was against NJIT, they were laying 17, and they did not cover that number. I think they only won by 6 or 7 points. So be weary of those big spreads. But Ralph, you mentioned it. I think this is actually a good spot for San Diego State tonight. I had a couple of text messages come my way that said that they're going to be some friends are going to be on the Aztecs today. I don't think they have to win convincingly. I think San Diego State just has to get to the Mountain West championship game, and they will be a number one seed. I don't even think they have to win the Mountain West. I think there's that little competition for them for number one seeds. I don't know. What Drew, do you think there's another team out there, maybe a Dayton? They look last sort of that can reach out and grab that number one seed. I think Baylor, Kansas, and Gonzaga are locks no matter what happens this week and next week. I think San Diego State, maybe if they lose tonight or if they lose in the semis, maybe they could get knocked down. But I feel like the Aztecs are pretty set on the one line right now.
Yeah, I have them as the one. I think that they do win the Mountain West, but like you're saying, I mean, if they lose tonight as 17-point favorites, then I think it's up for the grabs, kind of depending on what the other teams do. But no, I think it's the Aztecs. Kind of to lose here.
I agree. And that gets us into some more of our top matchups. You're not going to see any Big Ten teams on the one line this year. But there are a couple of interesting matchups in the Big Ten. One in particular that I think holds a little bit of weight with what we're going to see, not only in the Big Ten tournament, but also in the NCAA tournament. It's a big matchup in Columbus tonight, Illinois and Ohio State. I'm fascinated by this matchup, Ralph. I think I saw last that the Buckeyes were laying 5.5. Yep, 5. I see a couple 5s out there, but mostly 5.5 across the marketplace. Open 6.5. So the money's coming in on Illinois. Public's on Illinois. Bit of a trendy dog tonight with Brad Underwood and company. The Illini going into Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. What are your thoughts on this Big Ten matchup?
I like the way the Buckeyes played. You still don't have your complete roster for them. Kyle Young is probably still out. I haven't heard what his situation is. But I like this Illinois team. I think they can keep it close. I think this is going to go down to the wire. I do expect Ohio State to win the game. And, off that Michigan win, they have to stay. It's not like you're looking past Illinois, but, it's tough facing those two Michigan teams and having this game sandwiched. It is senior night. I go back and forth on senior night. People think it's an automatic positive, but I necessarily don't. But, you have Andre Wesson, Khalib's brother. He's the only senior that really has done anything. I mean, this Ohio State team is so young. Now, I'm sure Khalib's going to go to the pros. He's not coming out because he thought about going to the pros last year, and he decided to come back. So I'm sure they're going to lose both Wessons. But this team is just very young. But I like Illinois. I like Illinois' defense. I love what they've done. Dusami is just a stud in the middle. You have a 7-footer in Cockburn who can give Wesson some trouble. Wesson's only 6'9", I believe. So Illinois, I think, matches up with them. I think close game. I would lean plus the points here.
Yeah, me too, Drew. I think Ohio State and Michigan State, to me, are the two teams in the Big Ten that I think are the most poised to make a run in the tournament, just because of how balanced they both are. We talked about their KenPom ratings being top 20 in both. But this Ohio State team, it is tough to lay points in the Big Ten. I just don't like laying points in the Big Ten. It's just one of those leagues where, on any given night, literally any team could reach out and grab you. And I feel like Illinois is a live dog tonight.
I'm with you. I think this is a little bit pricey sidewise. I haven't gotten involved, but Ohio State, something I've noticed with the Buckeyes is they play pretty lockdown defense in Columbus for whatever reason. Now, both teams are top 30 defensive efficiency here. Neither team really going to look to push the pace. It kind of has the profile of an under game. I could see this, as we get to March, kind of slow up and down the court here, or, just slow on offense overall. So it kind of leads me towards this under.
It does, and we're seeing actually a lot. This actually could have been in the market mover segment for the lack of movement. 81% to the under in this game, 81% to the over in this game. But the line's only moved a point, which is not a huge move for that much action being on one side. And if you're going to give me that extra point, I'm seeing 132s across the marketplace right now. I agree with you, Drew. I think a first half under would be good in this game, especially with senior night for Ohio State. Those games tend to start slow, the senior night games, especially if teams aren't shooting it well from three. And Illinois has struggled a little bit from three this year. The DeSumo kid's really good. He can carry a team, and he can win a game or two for Illinois, not only in the Big Ten tournament, but in the NCAA tournament as well. And I love Brad Underwood as a coach. I mean, I love Chris Holtman, too. I think he's a very underrated coach in the Big Ten. But Brad Underwood taking that Stephen F. Austin team, of course, to the tournament over the last few years, and now he's in Illinois doing a good job. So interesting game there. The other game I wouldn't mind touching on is this Pac-12 game. I think, and again, it's not the sexiest matchup on the board, but I think Oregon, to me, is starting to become one of those teams that people really need to start taking seriously. They don't do anything exceptionally well. They're just a solid team across the board. I know their offense is in the top 10 in KenPom, but I do think this Oregon team is a fascinating handicap as we get into March, Ralph. I believe the last I saw, they were laying 15.5 tonight against Cal, who's been really bad this year, but they've had a couple of decent wins late. Line's moving towards Cal here. Any thoughts on this late night Pac-12 game with the Ducks?
Yeah, you're talking about, Oregon, and obviously they live and die with their point guard Pritchard. But, for those UNLV fans, imagine if we had Justin, their center. Shakur Justin used to be at UNLV and transferred out there. So, the UNLV Rebel fans are thinking, wow, we really had some talent here. And, that happens more. But I really do like the way Cal has played down the stretch. And, you look at their record and it's 13-16. You look at their pack record and they're 7-9. But they are just so much more competitive with Mark Fox. And there's a difference when I'm handicapping late in the season. If I have a first-year head coach like Mark Fox, who spent 10 years at Georgia, and was the Wolfpack head coach prior to that at Nevada, when I have a coach like that is transforming a team into a better team. The Cal Bears have been a mediocre team or a losing team for multiple years. The record's not quite there, but they played a very difficult schedule, but they've been competitive in their games, and it's so much different when you have a team like Cal with a first-year head coach continuing to play hard down the stretch compared to a team that perhaps was better, has fallen back in record the last few years, has a head coach that may be a lame duck head coach. It's night and day when I get to late February and early March. To me, the play on teams, regardless of the record, you could be a bad team and beat some crappy teams and have a win. But the way they're playing, and, yes, they got blown out against Washington by 25. That was Washington in a must-win. But, the Arizona State lost by 5. And, the Colorado State lost by 6 on the road. And they lost to Oregon by 5 at home. I like the way Cal's playing. They slow it down. Mark Fox has them playing very slow because they don't have the offensive prowess to match up with some of these teams. But you do have senior guards. You have Boston and South, so you have 2 guys there that can control the ball. I do think Cal keeps this close.
Interesting. Drew, I feel like the Bears could be a live dog tonight in Eugene.
Possibly. This does have that. It is a late night degenerate special, on TV too, which always makes it a little bit more interesting as a sports bettor here. And a lot of action, a lot of tickets going to be written on this. So watch this, likely some line movement both side and total before tip. Both teams really slow it down, man. They're not going to be too many possessions in this one. Oregon, the more offensively efficient team, which makes me look towards the Ducks, but it's a lot of points here, man. And I agree with everything Cal said in terms of this Cal team, playing tough, not giving up on the season, kind of almost that UNLV, profile of playing hard for their coach. Mark Fox, coming from Georgia, I thought he did a pretty good job there. And it always worries me, both in college football and college basketball, going from kind of like coast to coast here, because usually I look for that and kind of look to fade that coach. But I believe Mark Fox has some West Coast ties to the high school coaches and stuff, so that should help him out building this program up at Cal. I just think that possession-wise, betting tonight's late-night degenerate special here, not a lot of possessions. Both teams decent on the defensive end, so it's another game I would look towards the under.
Yeah, interesting spot. I would say Oregon needs this game to an extent because they're a half game back of UCLA in the standings, and that's a good thing to look at this weekend. And that's exactly was our handicap in that Tennessee-Kentucky game earlier this week. Kentucky's the number 1 seed in the SEC, or not in to 1 seed in the Pac-12 yet. There's a little bit of meat on the bone there in the conference standings that they need to ascend to. And, of course, UCLA is having a great season as well. You got to give Mick Cronin credit. He's won 7 in a row with the Bruins as they look to make a run at the NCAA tournament. All right, best bets for tonight, guys. I'm bringing up the rear. I had the 1 loss last night. I missed my Minnesota pick by a point. They lost by 5. I was getting 4. Oh, well, it happens. Drew, you hit with FSU on the money line. Good pick. Ralph, Rice, +1. They won by double digits. Good stuff. Drew, I'll start with you, bud. What are you looking at tonight?
Yeah, the FSU game, never in doubt last night.
Yeah, right.
hey, I've had those go against me. I'll take it.
I get it. I know it was a fun one at the end of regulation there.
It really was, man. But overall, I really like. This is a game I was looking at before Ralph said those kind of system stats that I thought was great, and it was sort of into my handicap. I didn't know those exact numbers. But San Diego State, I would look for them to kind of press on the pedal here. And I'm going back to the well. I bet against Air Force yesterday, and it's always tough as a sports bettor. Take it on the chin and still go back to it, but I'm going to do it here. San Diego State, I think top line talent minus the 17 right now. Always tough to lay a big number, but we get a way more talented team here, Jared. So I'm going to lay it here with the Aztecs.
I love that. I love that trend. I think I got multiple texts. Kelly especially was texting me saying San Diego State's the pick today. So I guess I can't really fade either of you guys. You're very smart when it comes to this stuff. I'll be backing the Aztecs again today, or not again, but I will be just backing the Aztecs today. If you've been backing them the last couple of weeks, you've been losing. But today I do think they get it done. Ralph, I feel like there's a play on the board that you haven't talked about yet that's going to be your best bet. I just have a hunch.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring up 2 points, and going back to Drew's best bet yesterday. In baseball, we're all accustomed to betting the money line. In football and in basketball, I think there's some opportune times to bet the money line, and Drew did that with Florida State yesterday.
Yeah.
Some people may have lost that game depending on certain instances where it's okay to lay the $1.30 or $1.35 and get the value and just get the straight up winner, especially with a team that perhaps is a little shaky in the free throw area. So just a point I want to bring up is, we don't often talk about money lines in basketball, but there are certainly times I play them, and I think you should look at them. I do want to mention I have a 5% play. Last year in March Madness, I went 16-4 on games rated 4% or higher. My top plays in the postseason. I do have my first 5% March Madness play up. It is in a conference tournament game. That at wagertalk.com. I already told you that I played Wichita State Memphis under the total, and I'm going to give you one more best bet that I played, and it's game 690. Not one of the games that we're going to be watching on ESPN tonight, but it's UC Davis -2. And you look at UC Davis, Hawaii is struggling on the road like they often do, but UC Davis got Rogers Pinta back 6 games ago. Since that time, they've gone 6-2 straight up in 8 games ago, excuse me. Since that time, they've gone 6-2 straight up in ATS. They've lost 3 straight to Hawaii, including by 1 point. Hawaii's 3-10 ATS against conference foes, and Hawaii is brutal on offense. They're shooting 37% on the road. I think UC Davis gets it done at a G price. They're only laying a basket tonight.
Interesting. I'm going to the Yeah, where is that? Yeah,
that's at Davis. That's not the tournament yet. Those are
okay.
This is the end of the Big West regular season.
Yeah, I saw a little movement in that game off of UC Davis. So the money, so you're getting a better line than where it opened at. And I'm seeing 2s across the marketplace right now. Interesting spot there. I haven't capped UC Davis a ton this season, but I'll be keeping a close eye on them tonight. So I'm going to the Missouri Valley, the Mo-Val, as I like to call it. Interesting spot tonight. We're seeing a ton of movement in this game. I was going to use it in the market mover segment, but I figure since I was going to use it as my best bet, it kind of doubled as that. Drake against Illinois State. I like Drake tonight. We're seeing the line move in their favor. Illinois State's had a really, really poor season. Very, very poor. And Drake has not played well of late, but this line movement was very stark. It was almost too much to overcome for me. And these two teams just played each other a couple of weeks ago, and Illinois State won at home. And now I think the tables are going to turn a little bit, and I think Drake -4.5 is where I'm seeing the line right now. A couple 4.5s out there in the marketplace, and I think Drake punches their ticket to the semifinals in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament tonight. So that is my best bet. Going a little off the radar tonight. I had some Big Ten options. I was thinking about playing that Nebraska-Michigan game, but I decided against it, and that Ohio State line was a bit too high. So I'm staying in the Midwest, but I'm going to go Missouri Valley. I'll take Drake tonight. -4.5. We'll see how we do with our best bets tomorrow. Guys, before I say goodbye, anything you're interested in else on the card tonight that we didn't get a chance to get to?
Nope. I'll mention because it'll be starting by the time we film tomorrow.
Sure.
One of my favorite spots is situationally in the Missouri Valley Conference. The lowest seeds play the late game tonight, and they play the number 1 seed tomorrow, the first game at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern. It's a huge scheduling edge that the Missouri Valley gives their number 1 seed. And to me, it's often a play on. I like playing first half and for the full game for that number 1 seed that plays at noon.
Interesting. I don't know I think who's the 1 seed in that tournament? Is it Northern Iowa?
Oh yeah, it's UNI.
And it's going to be that Illinois State Drake winner. that gets them tomorrow. Wow, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, they play Illinois State and Drake play at 7 o'clock tonight, and then it'll be a 1 o'clock tip tomorrow between Northern Iowa and the winner of that Illinois State Drake game. I think it will be Drake, and I hope it is Drake by at least 5 points. Drew, anything else before you guys head over and watch some real basketball over at the Thomas and Mack Center?
Yeah, no, just I'm excited to get over there. Thomas and Mack, we got Mountain West Conference action. My first college basketball game in quite some time, Jared, living in Costa Rica and then Vegas. Yeah. So it's been a couple years now, man. Long overdue. Really excited about it.
Good stuff, man. I'll let you guys go and have some fun. Have a couple of extra cold ones for me. Again, thanks for watching the Tip-Off Show here, powered by Wager Talk TV. For Jared Smith, we've got Ralph Michaels. Follow him on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Drew Martin at Drew Martin Bets. And don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wager Talk TV, and of course, WagerTalk.com and SportsMembo.com for all the angles, all the trends, all the picks. Lots of college basketball to get to over the next few weeks. And, of course, I got the two right guys to talk about it with me. So for them, I'm Jared Smith. Again, follow me on Twitter at Jared Lee Smith. We'll see you tomorrow, guys.
Thanks, guys.